Hey everybody, Captain B-Nard back here with another episode of the Captain's Recap. Today we are going to be talking about the BHDL4 quarterfinals. That's right, all of the action to come out of the first round of the playoffs here in the fourth season of Battle Hub Draft League. And here to discuss that with me, we have none other than a former BHDL finalist in his own right. We have Brandon P. Welcome aboard, Brandon.
What's up, everybody? It's just me, Brandon P., your favorite commissioner here, and yeah, I'm really happy. I'm happy to be here, and just here for a good time.
Yes, I'm happy to have you on board because many may say, well, I am BHDL's number one analyst. You definitely give me a run for my money in that department. Perhaps one of the most objective, if not the most objective, analyst we have in the commissioner's team here. You try to call it down the middle, call it like you see it. And yeah, definitely interested to hear your insight into these big quarterfinals matchups here that we had this week.
And I'm telling you guys in advance, these were some very crazy battles too.
Yes.
Very entertaining stuff over the weekend for sure.
Absolutely, yes. So, having said all of that, we will go ahead and jump right into looking at our first game here in the playoffs in the quarterfinals. And that is, of course, going to be the matchup of Raymond and the Mamoswine Doubters taking on Pokemaster 88 and the California Trailblazers. So, obviously, Raymond is. Well, he needs no introduction, let's put it that way. His record, his resume speaks for itself here in the playoffs. This is his fourth playoff appearance here, as he's won two prior seasons in the Battle Hub Draft League. And the worst this guy has ever done in the Battle Hub Draft League is make it to semifinals before being eliminated, which he did last season. So, but yeah, obviously you can see his team on the side there. Some pretty powerful stuff. He's got the Latios, the Ogerpon base form, the Terrapagos, all very solid stuff there. The Tinkaton is a great utility Pokemon as well. The Mamoswine, that mascot there, provides a lot of power and utility. He's got the Tornadus Therian for even more power. Wheezing is a great utility and very tanky. And then, of course, he's got those Terra Captains, Lantern, and Blaziken, which he's made great use of throughout the season here. Stack that up against Pokemaster 88. He is no slouch. He is a three-time playoff contender in his own right as well. So 3 out of 4 seasons he's made it to the playoffs here in BHDL. So definitely put some respect on his name because he's a very solid player and he has a very solid team too. He has, of course, the mascot, the Meowscarada, great power, utility, speed there. A lot of power and speed with the Iron Moth as well. Skarmory and Hitmontop provide some more utility, and Swampert very tanky. Hitmontop, I failed to mention, is one of his Terra Captains alongside the Alolan Raichu, and then he's got the Florges, which just never wants to die, on deck as well. So when I look at this matchup on paper, I'll be honest with you, and this may seem a little bit of a shock to some people who've been following the BHDL for any length of time, but when I look at these teams on paper, I actually give the edge to Pokemaster. I feel like his team actually looks really good into Ray's team. I feel like because if you look at what he has on deck, he's got the Meowscarada, which I think really um, just really does work to Ray's team. You know what I mean? Like the Meowscarada does work to the Latios, it does work to the Ogerpon, potentially the Terrapagos too. The speed tier is really good. I should say, generally speaking, the speed tier on Pokemaster's team is very impressive. But also the Iron Moth seems like it puts in a lot of work against Ray's team as well. Ray does have his threats. Obviously, the Terrapagos just doesn't want to die. No matter what. But the Terra Captain's Lantern and Blaziken could definitely do some work. But all in all, I do feel like Pokemaster's team has the edge on paper here. But what do you think about it, Brandon?
For those of you who watched the the playoff preview that was done last week by me, Emerald, and the best not really.
Yep.
Um,
Available on
I
the
gauged
Battle
that
Hub Draft League's official YouTube channel, but go on.
if you watched that, then you know I also then y'all would know that I also gave the edge to Pokemaster.
Yes.
Because when I was looking at the teams on paper, so first of all, Meowscarada, I also agree, just looks like it has a really good matchup in the Rays team, especially considering it outspeeds the entire team.
Yes.
So it forces Ray to either have to run something scarfed or run some sort of speed control so he doesn't just always get beat by the Meowscarada. And granted, he has things like, for example, Blaziken with because a lot of people forget that its special attack stat is pretty much as good as its physical attack stat. So Vacuum Wave could be one thing to answer Meowscarada. But then if he has Chris has the Florges, which also never wants to die. So it's like trade offs to running a special Blaziken for stuff like that. But also as something else you said, I also thought that the Iron Moth had a really good matchup into Raymond's team, and yeah, just because of this between those two mons and just the speed tiers, I thought like on paper Chris just looked really strong in the Ray because Ray has to either A make a lot of switch ins or B just try to run speed control of some sort. Otherwise, he's constantly going to be taking damage and stuff like that. And none of his mons really want to take hits from those two because of the coverage they get.
Yeah.
Albeit on Ray's side, he also has the I thought Terrapagos and maybe even Tornadus, depending on how he wanted to run them, could be obnoxious to Chris, I should say.
Yeah.
Because Terrapagos, besides the fact that it doesn't want to die, if anyone's ever looked at that thing's move pool, it has coverage for days. And
Yes.
then the Tornadus also gets a lot of coverage as well as between Regenerator and just the move pool it gets, like it could be very annoying. But I really thought Pokemaster would be the one to come out on top when I looked at these teams on paper.
Yeah, and it's interesting because another thing I want to mention before we get into what actually happened here is the fact that Ray chose this. So Ray was the number one seed overall in the entire league this season in the regular season, and therefore he got to choose his opponent out of the positions 5 through 8 in the playoffs, and he had the first pick between those four coaches, and he chose Pokemaster specifically, which I think I remember watching. Listen, it wasn't that all that long ago. Listening to you guys talk about it in the playoff preview video, and a lot of you didn't quite see that line of thought. You know what I mean? Like you guys didn't really understand why Ray would choose to face Pokemaster of all the coaches available, which I agreed with actually. I thought that of all of the teams that Ray could have chosen from, I would have put Pokemaster near the bottom of that list, honestly, because Ray's team just really does not seem to have that good of a time against Pokemaster's team. But
Not
Ray, yeah, go ahead.
not to mention also for those of you who have been following the BHDL for the last basically since season one,
Yeah.
Pokemaster going into this game, which even the other Emerald and the best didn't even know this when I mentioned this in the quarterfinals preview last week. Pokemaster went into this game with a 3-0 record against Ray.
Which is insane.
And
Yeah.
when you look at Ray's resume and then and then take into account that Chris has never lost to Ray, it is like wow, that's pretty impressive when you
Yeah.
consider who Ray is.
Yes, to have a 3 and
And
0
Ray
record.
still chose him.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. You're absolutely right. For Ray to not only choose a team that is a bad matchup for him on paper, but like you said, to choose a coach who he's actually never beat in the BHDL, a coach that actually was 3 and 0 against him. And like I mentioned at the top of this, talking about Ray, and I've mentioned this throughout the season with Ray is widely considered by pretty much everybody in this draft league as the standard bearer of the league because of his resume, because of how good he's done in every single season we've had this league going. So certainly I agree with you. it was a quote a bit bizarre, we'll say that Ray made this choice, but there is a method to his madness. I will say he is not widely considered the best player around these parts for no reason. He is for a very good reason, actually. And he believes, I know he does believe that iron sharpens iron, and he uh, always believes in doing his best and facing the best to be the best. So keeping that in mind, we will see that when we look at the match results here, it was in fact Raymond that did take the win in this match 3-0. Pretty solid game between these two, I will say. Though I thought Pokemaster had the edge on paper, this matchup does not, or this result, I should say, um, does not surprise me because one thing that I've also said throughout the course of commenting on Ray and his battles here in the BHDL is that the smart money always bets on Ray. Doesn't matter what the situation, the smart money always bets on Ray. So, um, going through this matchup here, a couple things stuck out to me in this matchup. Um, One of the big ones that I will say right off the cuff here is I feel like Pokemaster did not exactly play the best game here against Ray here. And so what I mean by that is he did make some plays that were very smart and very good. So like for example, early on, I think if I remember correctly, the leads in this match were Terrapagos on Ray's side and Swampert on Pokemaster's side. And Pokemaster did make the smart play, scouting for the grass coverage on Terrapagos. He switched out, and indeed, Terrapagos did have the grass move the energy ball. But then later on in the game, Pokemaster not only switches Swampert into Terrapagos knowing that it has the grass coverage, but then he actually leaves it in on the Terrapagos knowing it has grass coverage just to die. And so I feel like that's just one example, but I feel like there were numerous examples throughout this game where Pokemaster was just kind of making some plays that I thought, given the information he had, I wasn't sure where he was going with that. I think he did not make the best of plays in this matchup. I mean, like I said, some of the plays he made were quite good, but then again, he turned around and made some other plays that were not the best. Um, Additionally, I will say that Ray's prep in this match was absolutely phenomenal. You can see that he had a game plan going in. He had next level prep, next level thought. And this is another thing that I've said over and over again about Ray is that he, alongside with one other coach that we'll talk about in a minute, definitely in my mind have the best prep of any coaches in this league. So meticulous, so thoughtful, such attention to detail, just considering every scenario. Just you could see like Ray just engineered this game in his mind, and it went pretty much exactly how he thought it was going to go, I'm sure. And I think this game to me was truly an example of why everybody holds Ray in such high regard as a player, because he brought his A game and then some to this matchup, and it really showed. He overcame all those obstacles put in front of him, the fact that it was a bad matchup for him on paper, the fact that it was against a coach he's never beaten in the BHDL, and he overcame all of that to probably no one's surprise, to be honest with you. And that just speaks to the kind of player he is. Take nothing away from Pokemaster. I think he's a great player as well. He's a three-time playoff qualifier for a reason, but I think Ray really showed in this game why he is, as many of us would say, the GOAT. But what are your thoughts on it, Brandon?
um, so I know, like in my initial thoughts, I was thinking just how Terrapagos is just one of those mons, like I mentioned when we were talking about when we were talking about the teams before.
Yeah,
Something that I mentioned was this thing's move pool is so deep, it's so vast that you just really never know what to expect.
hmm
And I do feel like because of that, I feel like the uncertainty definitely got into Pokemaster's head a little bit.
yeah,
Because he had to keep making certain switch ins in case Terrapagos can't, like whenever, because Gray would just switch it in, like for example, he would just bring it in on Moth or just bring it in on Swampert, and then it's like, oh, I remember Pokemaster, he just kept thinking to himself, does it have the coverage? Does it have the coverage? Um, and I feel like the I've been there, like where the mind games kind of just get to you,
Yep.
and it can be like a little tough. Um, but I do think on Ray's side as well, something that I thought was really neat when I first saw it was I remember he had like neutralizing gas wheezing because
Yes.
he it's something we've seen throughout the season is that Chris has brought toxic spikes, not like on a week to week basis, but he's brought it enough times that you have to consider it.
Yeah.
And he took the time to consider that. And something else I thought was cool about it was, he's bringing us in on Hitmontop, who, if I'm not mistaken, is technician, and neutralizing gas shuts that off too.
Yes.
And then and I mean, Weezing kind of just had to come because it was his best answer to the Meow Scarada, who, as far as I know, gets absolutely no coverage whatsoever to beat Weezing. So
I don't think so.
it was because
Outside
I
of
remember
just
Chris.
outside of some stab
Cause I
dart
remember,
moves. Yeah.
cause I remember Pokemaster being a little. He was surprised to see Weezing at first.
Hmm.
And I also thought that Ray, him, like you said, he just planned for every scenario. And I thought it was like really cool seeing, like, I remember he had a lot of resistant berries, like I believe it's called the Roselli berry for the Latios and the Chople berry for the Terrapagos.
Yes.
That way these things could always just, take the hits, and then these are both pretty powerful mons in their own right, so they're gonna hit whatever back. And just going back off something you said about Chris making some Pokemaster making some plays that were, it was kind of like, uh, you kind of see why you see where the thought process was, but then it's like, maybe not being safe here would have been more beneficial. Like, for example, I remember Hitmontop was in front of Terrapagos,
Hmm.
who was so chipped that in my eyes, it was virtually functionally dead at that point because all the mons Chris had left, from what I can remember, outsped it anyway,
Right.
and it looked like it would die to any hit. And I remember he went for Terra Blast in case Ray wanted to switch out.
Yeah.
But I know this sounds easier to say in hindsight, but something I've learned in draft: if a mon is like functionally dead,
Hmm.
the other person's probably gonna just let it die.
For the most part.
Especially considering this is playoffs, so differential, that type of stuff doesn't even matter anymore. So I feel like that was like, I see the thought process, but at the same time, it's like, that was like one of those plays. And you already mentioned the Swampert play, leaving the Swampert in. I did not expect that to happen.
Yeah.
But throughout the whole game, though, it just seemed like Ray was always one step ahead. He had the coverage he needed. He had the items he needed. Even like the play with, like, I remember, like, he just sent the freaking Weezing in for a kamikaze attack, and it paid off because Iron Moth. It looked like it was the last thing on Chris's side that could have maybe got him the win, but
Yeah.
then after the explosion, yeah,
It was too
you
chipped.
watched the game.
Yeah, it was too chipped at that
Yeah,
point. Yeah, and obviously that was big. Obviously, we talked about the Terrapagos did a lot of work in this match. The Blaziken, of course, on Ray's side, did a lot of work too. That was what closed the game out, and it was, as you had alluded to, not so subtly before. It was a special attacking Blaziken, so that caught Pokemaster a little off guard, I think. Um, but yeah, I think to sum this game up, I'd say I think it was a good game. I think both coaches brought it to an extent, but Ray really went the extra mile in this one. And like I said, that the real story here is just Ray put on full display why people regard him the way that they do around these parts. I will say, but like I said, definitely take nothing away from Pokemaster. He played his heart out and he did try his best, and it was definitely a good showing for him. But it was not enough to topple the what's the word I'm looking for here, the dynasty that Ray is around these parts, unfortunately. So.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, moving along from that, obviously Ray will advance to the semifinals off that matchup, off that victory. But moving on to our next matchup here, that will bring us to the matchup of Scorpion and his Leaf Agents taking on Arcaniner and his West Texas Arcanines. So, obviously, Scorpion, very, very successful in the BHDL thus far as well. He's qualified for playoffs 3 out of 4 seasons, counting this one. He was a semifinalist and a finalist previously in BHDL season, so definitely very serious competitor. Um, Not to be taken lightly. And of course, he's got the powerhouse team consisting of the Palafin, the Zapdos, the Ting Lu. Very, very solid stuff. Of course, the Cyclizar, premier utility Pokemon that it is. A lot of power with the Ogerpon Cornerstone. The Terra Captains, Delphox, and Primeape are definitely very well placed. The Mimikyu is a big X factor on any game that it comes to, thanks to that decoy can survive any attack, any one attack, and then of course the Klefki is a lot more utility on the way as well. Stack that up against Arcaniner's team, of course. Arcaniner, this was a pretty special moment for him because this was actually the first time that he qualified for playoffs here in the Battle Hub Draft League. So very cool for him to be able to do that. He has participated in all 4 prior seasons as well, so definitely something he's been grinding toward, and very cool to see him achieve that. But his team, of course, there you can see consisting of the Latias, the Weavile, the Donphan, the Entei, a lot of bulky offense combined with some fast offense. Feeding into that, of course, the Inteleon as a Terra Captain, and then his other Terra Captain, Electros, very well placed and powerful. The Gengar and Lucario are very powerful Pokemon in their own right as well. And the Superior could be a threat if it gets going with those contrary boosts off the Leaf Storms, of course. So um, when I look at this matchup on paper, I think this is, in my mind, pretty clearly an advantage towards Scorpion in this game, despite the fact that these two actually did play earlier in the regular season. This is the only one of the 4 quarterfinals matches that we actually already saw this season. And despite the fact that Arcaniner actually did win that encounter between the two of them, I do still feel like Scorpion's team had the edge on paper. If I'm being completely honest, I was a little bit surprised by the fact that Arcaniner got that victory in the regular season. Obviously, there were some hacks involved, but nonetheless, I do think Scorpion has the matchup on paper. Palafin looks like it could really wreck shop here outside of a couple of Pokemon like the pretty much the Latias or potentially, I don't know, maybe the Electros. But there's really not much on Arcaniner's team that wants to deal with Palafin. Even some of his resistances, like the Inteleon and the Superior, do not have the best of defenses. Superior, I guess, can outspeed it, but it can't outspeed a priority Jet Punch, of course. Um, so yeah, I think Palafin has a good time into Arcaniner's team. Um, Zapdos seems pretty potent as well into Arcaniner's team. The Ting Lu as well, if it gets going, stacking hazards, that kind of thing. And then yeah, just I guess the Terra Delphox seems like it could put some work in. I do think Latias could potentially get something going, but it's just kind of shut down totally by the Ting Lu, by the Mimikyu, which is kind of a problem. Um, I don't know. The Weavile looks like it's probably one of the best answers that Arcaniner has into Scorpion's team, but even that's not going to take more than like one Jet Punch, if that. So yeah, I don't think I think this is something that I kind of only recently came to realize about Arcaniner's team is that I remember when we were doing the power rankings, you, me, and Emerald, and we both agreed that we thought Arcaniner's team was one of the best in the league. Emerald kind of dissented from us on that point. And while I do think Arcaniner has a great team here, extremely well rounded, the one thing that I think Arcaniner's team lacked, looking back on it, is that it doesn't seem like it has like that extra gear that it can go into. Like it doesn't seem like it has that next level powerful threat on it, if you know what I mean. Like it does have Latias, it does have Weavile, but they're riddled with their own issues. They have tons of weaknesses. Weavile's got paper thin defenses. So I don't know. While this team I think is great on paper, um, certainly in this case I would give the edge to Scorpion. But what's your take on it?
I also gave the edge to Scorpion because something I just thought of when I was looking at their teams is even though Arcan Niners seems to have a somewhat of a speed advantage,
Yeah.
to me personally, when I look at Arcan Niners team, I realize like besides Ladio, I said Latios, besides Latias and
Yes.
Donphan, his team doesn't really have any bulk.
Yeah.
And then Scorpion's team, on top of
Well, he's
having
got the
bulk, his
Electros,
team
but
also,
yeah.
but but even then,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. But but then on Scorpion side, you have like these Pokemons like Zapdos, who makes you have to think: Do I want to hit a fit? Do I want to accidentally, click a physical move and now I'm static?
Yeah.
You have the Ting Lu, who just doesn't want to die in front of a special attacker if it comes down to it.
Hmm.
Regenerator, Cyclizar, Sturdy Ogerpon. It kind of just goes on.
Yeah.
He has the bulk, and then all these Mons on. They have bulk, and then they can be offensively threatening too.
Yeah.
So I just felt like after like one, and we'll get into this later, but I just felt like if like even one wall falls on Arcaniner's side,
He's in
Scorpion
trouble.
would have a way to exploit it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with
but
that, and I do think we do want to mention, of course, here that Scorpion had second pick, being second seed, and he chose this match. He chose RK9er. Um, I see 100% why he did that with the choices that he had at his disposal. I think I definitely understand why he did this. I think to kind of backpedal to our last game, I think Ray really did Scorpion a favor, to be honest with you, by not picking Arcaniner himself and allowing Scorpion to have this matchup with Arcaniner, because I think Scorpion's team on paper uh, didn't nearly match up as strongly against any of the other three teams as it does with this one. So certainly I think definitely Ray did him a favor by allowing this matchup to happen by not choosing Arcaniner. But yeah, not to take anything away from Arcaniner, of course, a great competitor, very solid team. But I do just think, like you said, with the walls that Scorpion has on his team, and with Arcaniner, with the way the coverage on Scorpion's team is into Arcaniner's team, it's like if one of Arcaniner's walls goes down, if the Donphan, the Electros, the Latias go down, it's going to be a bad time for Arcaniner. But um, but yeah, when we look at the actual match results here, we will see that it was in fact Scorpion that did take the win in this match, 3-0. Very solid game on paper, I would say. Top to bottom, I felt like this game was pretty well played on both sides, pretty well prepped on both sides. I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really think there was any super glaringly obvious bad plays or moves on either side that come to mind here. Um, I feel like obviously on Scorpion's team, the Cyclizar actually put in a lot of work against Arcaniner's team. It was able to use that speed advantage and the great coverage that it has to just kind of work Arcaniner's team over a bit. Arcaniner did try to fight back with the Inteleon, did put some work in with its Terra Water, stab, all that. One thing I actually I did want to mention, but with a caveat, is the fact that the Hax Gods definitely did a 180 in this match, because we mentioned in their matchup in the regular season how um, the Hacks were certainly against Scorpion, missing multiple Will-O-Wisps and other things that occurred in that game, low rolls and whatnot. Um, in this game, they definitely did a 180, and there were on Arcaniner's side a bunch of hacks against him. There were multiple Draco Meteor misses. There were 50-50s for critical hits that did not come through when he needed them to come through. Um, I will say though, I don't necessarily think that any of the hacks that happened in this game would have changed the result too much, to be honest with you. So there were there was one point in the game, right toward the middle to the end of the game, where I believe the situation was it was Latias in against Ting Lu, and Latias missed back-to-back Draco Meteors, which was devastating because that basically allowed Scorpion to full hazard stack on RK9er. So he had, I think he had rocks and 3 layers of spikes up, if I'm not mistaken, um, after that exchange. So that was obviously huge, devastating for RK9er. But at the same time, uh, I don't think it, based on the damage output, once he finally landed a Draco Meteor and we saw the damage output that Latias was doing to that Ting Lu with the Draco Meteor, I don't think it really would have mattered if he would have hit those Draco Meteors, because Ting Lu is, like you said, it just takes every special hit for days, and it's just, you can't, taking Ting Lu on with a special attacker is just it's a losing battle most of the time. Um, and certainly in this situation it was. So, but yeah, and then there was another situation where, like I said, with the 50-50 crits with the Inteleon, it's like, I think that would have, if he would have got, if Arcaniner would have got a little luckier with those, I think definitely it would have tightened up those numbers a little bit. The differential wouldn't have been as as much as it was. But even then, I don't think that that would have ended up changing the actual match result. I think Scorpion played a very good game top to bottom. Arcaniner played a good game. I think the bigger story of this match, in my opinion, is just the fact that this was a case of Scorpion just having the matchup on paper. Like both coaches played their game and did what they had to do, and Scorpion's team just got there because the team has, I think, more premier threats. It has uh, great coverage, and it just, all the pieces were there for Scorpion to get it done. And Arcaniner was just a little power crept in this game, in my opinion. But what did you think about it?
Um, Before I even say anything, we both must do one thing though.
What's that?
We must congratulate Palafin on finally making it to the
There
playoffs
you go. It happened.
because
It finally happened.
it's been a curse for the longest, and not only has he made it to playoffs, he's Palafin has also made it to the semifinals, which is
Yes.
crazy. And matter of fact, if I remember correctly, Baby Palafin actually got a kill in this game, and
It did. Yes.
I think that was his first one all season too. So you love to see it.
Yeah.
Um, I did. I know whenever I first saw, like, the teams, as in what everyone, like what both coaches brought,
Hmm.
because I saw that Arcaniner broke. He brought the same six he used earlier in the season against Scorpion,
Yeah.
and being someone who's been there and had to play someone, because I know, like, at a previous draft I was in, I had to play Roller and Lazy Boy, who also participated in the BHDL. I had to play them twice,
Yeah.
once in the season, once in the playoffs, so back to back. So yeah, I know how that feels.
Yeah.
Um, so I really like the "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" approach, because
Yes.
that's just that's just that's my premier cat. Like, that's my saying. If I can say it, I love to say it.
Of course.
Um, but just going back off of something I mentioned earlier, I thought Arcaniner had a really offensive team, but to me, I felt like as soon as Don Fan went down, Scorpion was just like in the driver's seat from there,
Yeah.
because um, he got all those hazards up later on after the Dawn fan was dead. So now Arcaniner has no way to remove them.
Yeah.
And the what's it called? The Weavile, who could have maybe been threatening, now it kind of just can't be because of the hazards, and it was just unfortunate for him to lose Don Fan kind of early
Yeah.
before. Because, as long to me, as long as the team, I know this sounds easy to say in hindsight, but to me, as long as whenever a Ting Lu is there, Don Fan just has to stay alive
You
somehow.
need your hazard
But
removal to be alive until the end of the game. Yeah, or at least until the Ting Lu goes down. Absolutely.
yeah, because we know Ting Lu has those shenanigans, and because he's Ting Lu. But I thought the offensive cyclozone was really cool though because life orb regenerator,
Mhm.
recoil moves, that those all just synergize very well. I think
Yes.
Arcanine played a really good game though, but it just seemed like Scorpion was just always a step ahead,
Yep.
and he had really great prep too. Like it just seemed like he was prepared for everything. And even when stuff didn't go his way, like for example, the red card on the Mimikyu not going off,
Mhm.
um, what else was it? And I remember that the very following turn, the freaking Don Fan got the high roll and killed his Mimikyu. I remember there was a point earlier in the game where his he actually lost. He was the first one to lose a Pokemon, the Primate, and it just seemed like even when things didn't go his way, even when he lose a Pokemon, he just stayed calm, composed, and he just had a plan that he just stuck to. And that just seems how he's been playing all season, actually. Because I feel like out of all the coaches who's made it to playoffs, like to me, this is my opinion, but to me, I'm just the most impressed with his prep, with Scorpion's prep, with the way he plays, because it just seems like like you said earlier, he accounts for every scenario.
Yeah, if you guys can't tell at
And
this point, the other coach I was talking about with alongside Ray with having the best prep in the league, what is Scorpion? Yes, absolutely, and I stand by that statement 100%. The both of them do really have next level prep in it, and it certainly does show off in this one for Scorpion.
and yeah, it was just to me it was a fun game to watch, and the hacks was very unfortunate though. But like you said, it probably wouldn't have mattered too much. And in hindsight, and I know this is just hindsight, but in hindsight, maybe that would have been the time just to get Weavile in, and even if you force the Ting Lu out, hey, something. But I know that's just hindsight. But
Yeah.
outside of that, though, I think coaches made they played their game, they made good plays, but Scorpion was just the one who took it an extra mile this time.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. And yeah, with that, Scorpion will advance to the semifinals, of course, as well. And so moving on from this game, that is going to bring us to the matchup of Beardo and the Atacama Tyrannitars taking on Abomination and the Athabasca Miltanks. So, before we
I'm
even get in,
surprised.
what's that?
I'm surprised you didn't say the
Oh,
A
I've
B
yeah.
C D. Yeah.
Trust. So okay. So that was I was gonna say before I even get into this matchup, I have to comment on the fact that this is the battle of the ABCs. Of course, the ABCDEFG Tyrannitars versus the ABCDEFG Miltanks. The battle for alphabet supremacy. Is here, ladies and gentlemen, in this matchup. Battle of the Don fans, I have to, or the Don fan clones, I have to point out as well, because that was pretty interesting. And definitely, I think the most even of all of the playoff matches, by many accounts, my own included. But yeah, the alphabet battle was something I was wanting all season, and we finally got it here. And I'm happy you guys realized that in the preview video, and I'm calling it out here in the post game video. But yeah, gotta love it is all I can say. um, but yeah, when you look at these teams, obviously Biridu on the one side, very very accomplished BHDL coach as well. This playoff appearance here makes him 4 for 4 in playoff appearances here in the Battle Hub Draft League, which is incredible. That is a feat only duplicated by two other players. We already saw one of them, that was Raymond earlier, and we'll see the other coach in the last matchup that we look at in a minute here. But yeah, obviously you can see why he's made it that far, of course, with stuff like the Iron Treads, the Chi Yu, Ogerpon Wellspring, Salamence, Azumarill, just great stuff. A lot of power, a lot of bulk, a lot of speed as well, and priority within those Pokemon. The Terra Captains Kilowattrel and Muck are well placed and powerful, and the Uxie is a lot of utility. So very, very solid team. Definitely one of the better teams on paper in the league. However, he is taking on the team actually that many believe to be the best team on paper in this league this season, and that is Abomination's team, of course. And Abomination has made quite the splash here, as this is his first season in the BHDL, although a lot of us will be no strangers to Abomination, myself included. I've had many battles with him over the years here in across multiple platforms and multiple Pokemon games. Been with him in draft leagues in the past as well. So he is a very strong competitive battler and accomplished draft leaguer. So definitely no surprise to me to see him make it to the playoffs on his first shot here in the BHDL. But you can see why with stuff like the Great Tusk on his team, obviously the premier OU threat that it is. The Great Dragon Fairy Steel Core of the Clefable, the Dragonite, and the Heatran there. Um, of course, he's got those Terra Captains, Jolteon and Vileplume, which are very well placed, very powerful. Of course, the Suicune is a great defensive Pokemon, and the uh, Chinchino is very fast and can hit quite hard too. And of course, the Reuniclus, something he's like to make a lot of use of this season, very bulky and very powerful. So when I look at this matchup on paper, quite honestly, I cannot pick a favorite. I think this is a very even match on paper. Of course, I mentioned it before. You've got the battle of the Don fan clones with Iron Treads versus Great Tusk. They kind of cancel each other out, although Great Tusk has the edge on Iron Treads just because of the typing and the coverage. Chi Yu looks very strong into a lot of Abomination's team. Obviously, he does have certain checks for it. But maybe perhaps the Suicune, perhaps the Dragonite with multi-scale up, perhaps the Clefable, or the Heatran even potentially. But those are all what ifs, and it's guessing. So like obviously Clefable can take a Dark Pulse, but it won't appreciate a Fire move. Heatran can take a Fire move, but it won't appreciate a Dark Pulse, and so on. So definitely that's a deadly 50-50, as they say there. Um, but additionally, there's a lot of good stuff that on Abomination's side that the Dragonite can do. I thought that Dragonite in particular had the potential to do a lot of work to Biridu's team because between the fact that it has multi-scale, so it can live basically any hit guaranteed, combined with either a setup set or even just a choice set. The coverage that Dragonite has against Biridu's team is pretty phenomenal. So I thought Dragonite could be a huge player in this match, for sure. Um, but yeah, also on Biridu's side, I thought that potentially the Ogerpon Wellspring has nice coverage into Abomination's team, and then the Terra Captain Kilowattrel could be something to look out for. On the flip side, though, on Abomination's side, I think the Terra Captain Vileplume could be something to watch. So I don't know. I call this one right down the middle. I think these teams are very evenly matched on paper. But what did you think about it?
Um, when I first looked at the teams on paper, I honestly wanted to give a slight edge to Beardew, primarily because Beardew has a lot of my Pokemon that are offensively threatening into Abomination's team.
Right.
Albeit Abomination does have his walls, though. But besides just being offensively threatening, his team, for the most part, actually, I don't think it's for the most part. I think it's just a fact that Beardew has the speed advantage
Yeah.
outside of the Jolteon because after the Chinchino, the speed tiers kind of just fall off a cliff, as we mentioned. Well, as it was mentioned last week in the quarterfinals preview.
Right.
Uh, but at the same time, Abomination has been making his walls work, and like you said, very even matchup on paper. Kind of hard to give an edge to either one, but I do remember when I initially looked at the team, I gave a slight edge to Beardew, primarily because of the speed tiers.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the game, it was definitely a very competitive game to watch.
Absolutely. So, speaking of that game result, when we take a look at that, we will find that it was, in fact, Abomination that did take the win in this matchup. 2-0 victory, pretty close one. This was a really good game, honestly. Highly hard fought, even, and competitive matchup in every sense of the word, I will say. Um, I did think that, honestly, I thought that both coaches prepped for this game very well. I thought that they both played pretty well. I do think there were, at certain points, I think there was, obviously you can't always make the best play. I don't know that I would say that there were too many like outright mistakes or really any that I can think of, but I do think there was a little bit of over predicting on both sides that definitely came into play here. I do think Abomination uh, played to. I think what I'll say is this: I feel like the reason Abomination won this game is because he figured out how to play to his strengths a little bit better than Biridu did in this matchup. I think that um, he let his Pokemon do what they're supposed to do. So we'll say that the Great Tusk did put in quite a bit of work in this matchup. Um, but the real MVP of this match was Dragonite, as I kind of had alluded to before. I thought that Dragonite just had a really, really strong matchup in this game, and he definitely proved me right by putting it to good use in this matchup. Um, the choice set with extreme speed did so much work to Biridu's team because it doesn't matter what your speed tiers are. You can't go faster than an extreme speed unless you're using extreme speed and your base speed's faster. But you get my point. Or there's an upper hand involved, but you know what I mean. Um, so but yeah, so I think Abomination. I think definitely he played to the strengths of what his Pokemon can do. I think a bit better than what Biridu did. So one thing I will say that I think was a little bit of a mistake on Biridu's side. I think with his Ogerpon Wellspring, he opted, if I'm not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, he opted to run Swords Dance over the Fairy coverage on Ogerpon Wellspring, and I think that really came back to bite him because he had no coverage for the Dragonite. Um, and I think that was because his move set was, I think his move set was, if I'm not mistaken, it was um, the grass coverage, the water coverage, psychic coverage in Swords Dance. I think that's what it was, because he wanted to be
It
able to hit,
was.
because he wanted to hit Vileplume with the psychic coverage. Yeah, so he sacrificed fairy coverage on the Ogerpon Wellspring, and I think that decision I think was one that obviously it's a hindsight. You could say it's hindsight, and I feel like it probably is hindsight, but that's one of the problems, or that one of the things that hurt him in this match is not having that coverage for the Dragonite, and I think that when you're that feeds back to what we were saying before about the team construction for Abomination and having what many consider to be the best team on paper this season, is that when you have a team that is so well rounded, even if perhaps you don't have the best speed tiers and you're lacking in a little other departments, you are going to be in good shape because you're going to put your opponent in a situation where they have to either sacrifice coverage or they have to sacrifice utility. Like I know that Beardo had the what do they call it, the four move slot syndrome. I'm sure he had that when it came to more than one of his Pokemon this week, um, specifically the Ogerpon. Um, but yeah, that's the difficult decisions that you have to face when you are facing such a well-rounded team. And I think that coverage is great. I see where he was going with it, and I can't super fault it for him because, like I said, a lot of it's hindsight. But for me, in my mind, I think I would always, like when I do team building, I would always rather have the coverage because the one thing that I never want to see when I'm playing a game is I look at my Pokemon and it says not very effective beside all their moves against another Pokemon. Like that is the one thing I never want to see under any circumstances, because if I see that, I know that something's gone wrong in my mind. Um so yeah, so I think that played a big role, but like I said, Abomination just he positioned himself where he could just basically choice band extreme speed the crap um, out of Biridu, and that's really how this game was decided at the end. Um, like I said, the Dragonite just put in the work in this game, did what it was designed to do essentially. Um, and yeah, like I said, I don't think that there was really any big mistakes or misplays or anything like that. In my personal opinion, I don't think that there was any big turning point that like anyone threw the game or that. I think it was just a scenario of they both played their game, and I think that Abomination's game plan just ended up working better than Biridu's game plan in this one, and it led to his victory. So, but what's your take on it?
Um, so I was initially expecting this to be like a long and drawn out game, so I was very surprised at how fast paced this game was.
Yeah,
Um, but it felt like from start to finish, it was just always a fight for positioning, and they were just going back and forth the whole time. And the moment Abomination got his positioning, it was just he was just in the seat. Um, and something I do think was very crucial as well was the Dragonite living. Because I remember there was like a thunderbolt from the Kilowattrel towards the end. I could be wrong, but I want to say the Dragonite, the thunderbolt was like a low roll, but
yeah.
the Dragonite ended up living, and then it was just in position to just spam extreme speed the rest of the way.
Hmm.
Not that I think it mattered that much, because if I'm not mistaken, his Chinchino was choice scarfed, and this week Beardy was actually expert belt. So Chinchino could have just bullet seated away potentially, or just tail whip. Because I can't remember if Beardy was sap sipper on the Azumarill or not.
Yeah.
But it was unfortunate to see Beardy continue his quarterfinal woes. But I know he'll come back stronger next season.
Well, I don't know
Um,
about that. I mean, well, I don't know about unfortunate. I do love a good. We'll say this. So I like Biridu, but I also like a good meme. So as much as I like you, Biridu, I gotta tell you, I may like the meme even more. And the meme the we said let me say this also. The meme of Biridu losing in the quarterfinals. We have so few tried and true BHDL traditions left at this point. and and this might sound harsh, but I gotta say it is that I I can't be upset about it because I can't feel too bad about it because at the end of the day, making it to the playoffs I think is a great accomplishment. Um, Making it to playoffs 4 out of 4 seasons is an even bigger accomplishment. Um, I will say that I think that, or I this is funny. So I did some thinking about it, and I realized before we came on to record this that Biridu, as of this season, and it doesn't matter what happens for the rest of this season, Biridu is the only coach throughout all 4 seasons of BHDL to have the exact same finish in all 4 seasons. No other coach has managed to accomplish that. Not even the ones that like like there's not even a coach that participated in all 4 seasons that didn't make playoffs all 4 seasons, or anyone that did anything the exact same all 4 seasons. So we have to officially bestow the title of most consistent player in the league on Biridu at this point because he has consistently done good. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. I know he was feeling a little bit bad about it, but and I joke about it because the memes are great. But at the end of the day, I truly don't think that's something to be disappointed in my opinion. The fact that you could make it to playoffs in a highly competitive league like this 4 for 4 times is very impressive in my opinion. And there's a lot of coaches who um, pine for that success, So I think that it's not a bad thing, but we have to say that he is hands down the most consistent coach in the BHDL at this point. So
And it's crazy because now you done said something about it. I have noticed that in the last two games that we talked about before this one, both of those games involved traditions getting broken.
yes.
Because, Raymond beat Pokemaster. That was a little tradition. And then before this, Palafin made it to playoffs. So, dang. the traditions are getting we are running out of them. I'm just not
Yes.
realizing this.
Yes,
Oh
but
my.
I was going to say, speaking of more traditions being broken, you brought this up, I think, is that, or maybe it was Emerald that brought this up actually, that this match result is the something that's very rare to be broken as well, which is in this matchup, Abomination was technically the lower seed than Biridu because he had the worst record in the regular season. So this was an instance of the lower seed defeating the higher seed. Which actually I want to briefly mention before we move on is that Biridu did choose this, right? So we failed to mention at the top of this that this was the last choice that Biridu had to choose. He had two choices, and he chose to face Abomination in this matchup. I personally can't say whether or not I think that was the better of the two decisions. I honestly don't know because we'll get into my opponent in the last match in a second, but I don't know if this was the better of the two choices or not. I can't say for sure, but Beardo did choose this because he felt like this was the better of the two choices that he had, and it did not quite work out for him, but yeah, still, I think, like I said, I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of on either side here. Like I said, this was a excuse me, solid game top to bottom, and yeah, I think hard fought on both sides and nothing to be ashamed of.
For sure.
So, that is going to go ahead and bring us to our last matchup here of the quarterfinals. And that is, of course, going to be my matchup as I and my Philadelphia Pidgeys will go into battle against Emerald Miner and his Demolition Force. So, a couple things to get out of the way here in this matchup. So, as I had just alluded to, by the process of elimination, I was actually the only one of the top four players that did not get to choose my quarterfinals opponent. And so, by virtue of the fact that none of the other three coaches wanted to face Emerald Miner, I ended up having to face him in the quarterfinals, which is totally fine by me, just due to the fact that, speaking of very few traditions that we have left in the BHDL at this point, the tradition of me facing Emerald Miner exactly once every season has held thanks to this. So we've played each other in the regular season in all three prior seasons of the BHDL, and now we faced off in the playoffs. So we have got a matchup against the fabled Emerald Miner from the Discord server um, once in all four of the seasons. So I'm happy about that. Um, but yeah, on my side, obviously, we are both very accomplished here in the BHDL in our own rights. Of course, on my side, this is my third out of four playoffs, or the third time out of four seasons, I should say, that I and Philadelphia Pidgeys have made it to the playoffs here. Of course, in two prior seasons, I've made it to the semifinals, which is pretty cool. And yeah, my team, of course, as many have come to call the alternate reality version of the Philadelphia Pidgeys from last season, of course, with a lot of familiar faces: the Sneasler, the Goodra, the Scissor, the Rotom Wash, the Mudsdale, on and on. Um, and of course, the Terra Captains, Goodra and Mudsdale. Pretty powerful, in my opinion. The Indeedee with that synergy with the Unburden with the Sneasler, if I so choose to go that route. The utility of the Grimmsnarl, the power and speed of the Hisuian Arcanine, and the Azelf. Match that up against, of course, Emerald Miner, who once again is that third coach that we've been talking about that managed to qualify for playoffs every single season of the BHDL to this point. And you can see why. Obviously, I guess previously he's been in both he's been a finalist, he's been a semifinalist, he's been a quarterfinalist, and now he's back again. And you can see why. Obviously, he's got a good-looking team there with the Greninja, the Annihilate, the Metagross. He's got speed and power and bulk on there. Even more power and speed with the Enamorous, Therian form, that is, I believe. Um, or is that incarnate form? I always confuse them. Um, Fact check. Um, but yeah,
Oh, that's the incarnate form.
is that
Incarnate.
okay? Yeah, so fact check me, please fact check me, because I always confuse the Therian and the incarnate names with these Gen 5 legendaries. But yeah, he's also got the Terra Captains Cryogonal and Lycanroc and Zangoose too, which we saw put in some work in the past there. Moltres is very tanky, and the Sandy Shocks is a big threat, as they say, as well. So when I look at this matchup on paper, I do say I felt like I had a pretty decided advantage on paper in this game. I felt like, with a couple of exceptions, Sneasler could go absolutely nuts in this game outside of like a fully defensive Moltres or Metagross, perhaps. Um, I feel like Sneasler could really do a lot of work to Emerald's team. Overall, I do think my team is more well-rounded than Emerald's team this season. But let's not forget he does have premier threats on his team, obviously, like the Greninja, which does have the ability to outspeed my whole team, I believe, outside of like a Scarf or an Unburden on the Sneasler. Um, and then, of course, Annihilate could do a lot of work as well to my team. But despite that, I do feel like my defensive core and my coverage just match up pretty well against his team. But what did you think about it?
What? Well, okay. So I know if you watched the video from last week,
Yep.
I agreed, not agreed. I gave the edge to Emerald just so I wouldn't have to agree with the best, and I only did that because there's only two of us. So I just wanted to be I just wanted to be the difficult guy. That's all it was.
Fair enough.
But, oh,
I know a little
but,
something about that, but go on.
but in my honest opinion, though, I did think that see, the thing I like about Mr. Captain B-Nard's team is, on paper, when you look at this team, you wouldn't think, and I feel like this has been like a pattern throughout the seasons. You would think the team is not that threatening when you first look at it, but
Hmm.
then when you see how B-Nard uses it, when you really take into consideration what is here, you realize, like, dang, this team is actually like crazy. So I did think, like, the Sneasler, between the Sneasler and between your the walls,
Yeah.
that you had a good matchup in Emerald's team. But I did also think if Greninja could get, like, maybe like a battle bond boost off, or if Annihilate could get set up or something, like something along those lines. So I did think this could be, this was a game that Emerald should win as well. I
He
also
just
thought,
has
like,
to play
even
his
the
cards right.
Enamorous, and I even thought that, like, even the Enamorous didn't look the worst
Yeah.
outside of, like, things like, for example, obviously the Scizor,
Yeah.
uh the Rotom, stuff like that. But I thought that, I mean, at first I just really couldn't decide on who I thought could really give the edge to. So, I just impulsively chose Emerald, you know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But yeah, when we look at the actual match result here, we are going to see that it was in fact me that did take the win in this matchup 2-0. Pretty solid game through and through, I would say. Big things that stuck out to me with this game, playing it, obviously. The first two turns of this game were massive in deciding the fate of this game, I would say. For two reasons, actually, which I'll talk about now. So, the first reason is what actually happened in those two turns. And so first of all, I get the lead right. So, I was 50-50 on whether he would lead with um, Sandy Shocks or Greninja, but something was telling me he was going to lead with Sandy Shocks because he had led with Sandy Shocks most of his games this season, I believe. And also, I know Emerald loves his Hazard, so I was just figuring he was going to want to start Hazard stacking me as soon as possible. So I was like, you know what? I want to lead with Mudsdale because Mudsdale has a great matchup into the Sandy Shocks. So I get the lead right, and I do get the prediction right, and I go just straight for the Earthquake outright because I want to basically cripple the Sandy Shocks, if not take it out. So I do massive damage to the Sandy Shocks turn one as he gets his hazards up. But then, so that was big because the Sandy Shocks was on death's door, like right out of the gate. Um, I thought he was going to be Focus Sash, but he actually survived because he was like a max physical defensive variant of Sandy Shocks, which was a surprise to me, but it worked because he did tank a hit from Mudsdale. But then on the second turn, I was like, you know what? I feel like he's definitely going to want to save this Sandy Shocks, and if he doesn't choose to save it, if I click Stone Edge, he's low enough that he's going to get taken out with a Stone Edge, even though it's resisted. So I go for the Stone Edge just in case he decides to switch, which I kind of thought he might. And unfortunately for him, he switches directly into the Enamorus on an incoming Stone Edge and just loses the Enamorus immediately. Now I did crit him, but I do not at all believe that mattered because I was running Max Attack Mudsdale this week. And Enamorus has pretty pitiful defenses, especially on the physical side. Um, so I don't believe the crit mattered at all. But in those but the big thing was, like I said, in those first two turns, I got like 1.95 KOs in those first two turns essentially with Mudsdale, and that massively shifted the momentum in my favor. But also, what it did was it kind of made Emerald's mind turn off. Essentially, is like he felt mentally defeated at that point, because I watched his side of the game, I watched his commentary, listened to it, I should say, and after those first two turns, he just felt like completely defeated at that point in the game, and I think that he almost like mentally checked out at that point. And we've seen this before with other coaches in the past, where I think that if you get off to a rough start, and I'm not going to say that I'm above it all, because I've seen and felt the same thing happen to myself in games past before. Is you have like a rough first turn or two, like say someone hits you right out of the gate with something that you didn't expect, and you either take massive damage on a Pokemon or just lose it outright immediately and get nothing in return for it, then you're gonna be flustered at that point. You're gonna be thrown off your game. And I think that that really was the case with Emerald early in this game, because of those first two turns and how much he lost in those first two turns. He really, I think, just like almost gave up mentally at that point. And it was kind of downhill from there. Um, he did try to fight back, and he did end up getting some hacks against me later in the game. He got a poison with the Greninja. He got, I think, a crit with something else. And yeah, he did get a couple of hacks on me. I think I critted him back later in the game with another crit that didn't matter with the Mudsdale, I believe, on the Metagross to take it out with an Earthquake. But yeah, I think that was the biggest thing about this game. Is I just, at that point, after that point in the game, after those first two turns, I just kind of tried to stay the course and tried to stay consistent and play the game. I felt like, similarly with two of our other three games, right? So similarly with the Ray versus Pokemaster game, it didn't really feel like there was any point in the match where Ray was in danger of losing, right? And then when we go to the Scorpion versus RK9er game, it it didn't really feel like there was any point in the game that Scorpion was in danger of losing. And so similarly, I have to say with this game, especially after those first two turns, there was really no point in the game that I really felt like I was in danger of losing the game, because I felt like I was ahead. I had the momentum. I had the Sneasler in the back, which, by the way, didn't even hit the field this week. But I felt like I had the pieces that I needed, especially after those first two turns, and I didn't feel like I was in danger at any point after that. Although he did, Emerald did try to fight back, and Greninja put some work in. Um, what was it? Yeah, Greninja put some work in. Certainly, Annihilate and Metagross put a little bit of work in to try and get him back in the game. But yeah, on my side, the Mudsdale put a lot of work in. The Scissor put a lot of work in, and it just came to a point where I just kind of wore him out toward the end, as I just kind of stayed the course and played consistently, and just kind of wore him out at the end. But yeah, I think all of those things came together, and I was very happy for that to get the win in that scenario. But yeah, definitely a hard fought match on both sides, I think. And like I said, I think this game, to me, the story of this game is that it was won mentally, and it was Emerald kind of defeated himself mentally, I want to say, almost after those first couple of turns, and that made the path to victory for me a lot more clear. Um, so, but yeah, definitely another solid one all around for me. Always a pleasure to battle Emerald Miner. But yeah, what did you think about the matchup?
So for everyone who has watched Captain B-Nard side of the video,
Hmm.
side of the battle, I'm gonna take something out of his book. It
All
was a
right.
very fast and furious game. It was, that's what I think
Very
about
true.
it.
I couldn't have said it better
Because
myself.
because the early game was just very hectic on at least for Emerald because the like you said, just basically losing the Sandy Shocks and Enamorous like that early and then getting nothing out of them besides the I know he got the rocks up, but you still had the your hazard removal and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it was just to lose those two pieces that early like that. I've been there, so I just know like that's a very tough pill to swallow in the heat of the moment, and then to try to keep the push forward because I'm pretty sure like Enamorous could have really helped like later on in the game with certain scenarios. And then of course the Sandy Shocks is just just gone at that point.
Yeah.
And then I also remember that there was like a 50-50 with the Greninja where he went for the water shuriken in case you switched in, but then the Rotom. Now Rotom is getting massive chip on the Greninja, which is just
Yes.
adding to the downhill battle he was trying to fight.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, Greninja was after
it,
that turn. Yeah, because of that over predict on his side, I was able to hit him with a Specs Shadow Ball with the Rotom that chipped the Greninja so much that because it was Life Orb, it only had one more hit at him, hitting it before it took itself out. Which I felt like that was another thing, another reason that I felt pretty comfortable, especially toward the end of the game, because when it was getting right down to the end of the game, and I was seeing like, okay, he's only got a few Pokemon left, and one of them's Greninja, and that thing's dead after one more attack. Oh, he's only got two more Pokemon left, one more Pokemon left. His last Pokemon is Greninja, and it dies to Life Orb recoil after one more attack. So I felt comfortable after that point, knowing that Greninja was essentially dead in the water, pun intended, with its Life Orb. But absolutely, yeah, that was another thing that kind of led to the hole being dug deeper for Emerald that he couldn't get out of at that point.
because I could be wrong, but I think after Greninja went down, he didn't really have much that was going to break the Mudsdale at least. So
Yeah,
then it was just going to be really tough. Like you had to get through this wall and then the looming threat of a Sneasler.
yeah, he did. In his defense, he did have that sick tech. The grass knot Metagross caught me off guard, so I shout him out for that. I was not
Mm-hmm.
expecting that in any way, shape, or form. Perhaps he was inspired by our very own Brandon P's Giga Drain Muck from the week before. I don't know. Just saying, if you want to take credit for that, he's not here to defend himself, so go for it. But maybe you did inspire him for the surprise special grass move for super effective coverage on a physical Pokemon. But yeah, no, that definitely caught me off guard. But yeah, with the but yeah, I agree with the Greninja being functionally dead at that point so early as well. With like Enamorous being dead, Sandy Shocks being dead, and Greninja being functionally dead that early, it was tough. I think his only late game, his only hope of trying to come back into the match was if he were to like set up an Annihilate end game. Um, with like a bunch of bulk ups and stuff, but that was realistically that what I mean, he didn't know it at the time, but that wasn't going to work for him because I was actually Scarf and Deedee, Choice Scarf and Deedee, which always one shots Annihilate with an expanding force in the psychic terrain. So I think and if he predicts that and switches out to try and save the Annihilate, then he's lost all the work he did with the bulk ups, which is kind of what ended up happening toward the mid to the end of the game. Which with the Annihilate, which is he actually had switches out for the Annihilate in to take a psychic move from the Indeedee, but it's like at that point. Um, he had already bulked up, so it's like he goes back to square one every time he does that. So definitely a difficult spot for him to be in.
Yeah, but regardless, though, I did think it was a competitive game through and through because there was still a lot of good reads on both sides given
Yeah,
the circumstances. Um, He definitely fought to the end, though. It was. I still think. I still think it was a pretty competitive game all
I would
around.
agree. Yeah, he definitely Emerald. He definitely fought to the bitter end, and at the end of the game, the last turn was the Greninja taking itself out with its own life orb there, taking the Mudsdale with it. But I still had the two Pokemon in the back to secure the victory. So, um, but yeah, definitely a solid game. Definitely happy to take the win in that one, of course. So. But yeah, so I think that pretty well sums that game up. And yeah, that's I think just about it for this one. That will kind of I'll give the layup here. So because of these match results here, that is going to set up the semifinals for this coming week, which is going to feature Scorpion taking on Abomination on one side of the bracket, and then of course
Another rematch.
yes, that is a rematch from earlier in this season where Scorpion did defeat Abomination. And then on the other side of the bracket, of course, that is going to leave Raymond taking on yours truly, Captain B-Nard, which is quite the interesting match because a little bit of a recap within a recap for you guys. I have not faced Raymond in the BHDL since season one, and it was actually the semifinals as well in season one that we played, where he did get the better of me. Um, so yeah, those are your two exciting semifinal matches that these quarterfinal matches have set up for us. Very excited to see how those play out. This seems like a good time to tell you guys that next week, I want to announce that next week will actually be the very last episode of the Captain's Recap for the BHDL4. Regardless of whether I win or lose my semifinals match, which, as you know, based on everything, if you've listened to this for any length of time, you will know is going to be no easy feat to try and take it away from Raymond. But regardless of the results of that match and whether I make it to the finals or not, next week we will do a semifinals recap, and that will be the last recap of the season. So, but yeah, definitely some very hype semifinals games set up for next week. I know you're looking forward to it as well, Brandon. So,
Oh, for sure.
so
Because I just like the fact that this season, no matter what happens, we're going to end up with a new champion from last season. So
yes,
it's always nice. I always excite the prospect of a new champion is always exciting.
yes, true, true, absolutely. So, but yeah, I think that'll do it for this one. So thanks for watching again, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future. Of course, coming your way soon, we are going to have the semifinals of the BHDL4 featuring the Philadelphia Pidgeys taking on the incomparable Scholar and Vila Raymond. And yeah, of course, Scorpion versus Abomination as well. So, once again, I would like to thank my guest, Brandon, for joining me today to talk about all of the action out of the quarterfinals here in the BHDL4. And yeah, so thank you for that.
It's a pleasure being here, man.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to have you. So, yeah, and can't wait to look forward to the semifinals and the semifinals recap. So, stay tuned for that. That's it. And we'll see you next time.